Welcome everyone, Costin here with a discussion about Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires, no longer beta. The full launch has come with a pretty great trailer, I gotta say. Certainly one of the best trailers that we've seen for a Total War game to date. Certainly something that has gotten a lot of attention. As I'm speaking right now, as I'm recording this, the number of views on that trailer is getting close to 300,000. And given the way YouTube works, it likely has over 300,000. It just takes a while to update those numbers. Now, 300,000 views within a couple of hours just indicates a significant amount of interest in this, significant amount of interest from the player base, and it's coupled with a new patch, patch 2.4. Now, the patch itself doesn't have anything really substantial. Some bug fixes, some quest battles have been fixed. In particular, if you were playing as Tyrion, his quest battle was bugged. Now it's fixed. Maybe for this time around it will actually be fixed. I haven't tested it out yet, but based on what Creative Assembly is mentioning in the patch notes, there aren't any substantial changes, just a couple of fixes here and there, animation fixes, quest battle fixes, all that kind of stuff. But there are some big changes coming. We did get the tease of the Chaos Dwarves in the trailer at the very end of the trailer, and on top of that, Immortal Empires is now available for free to everyone that owns Warhammer 3. You no longer need to own Warhammer 1 or Warhammer 2. So Legend of Total War's petition worked. They gave us Immortal Empires if you just own Warhammer 3. I think they had to, because Realms of Chaos is just dead and buried. People don't care about it. They don't want to play it. They are not interested in it. People want to play Immortal Empires. It's always been a far bigger interest with something like Immortal Empires than the Realms of Chaos campaign. I think that they squandered the opportunity for Realms of Chaos. I feel that the campaign wasn't particularly well designed. But what do you get if you just own Warhammer 3? Well, you will get... Actually, I think the best way for me to show it is to just go over here. So what you will get are all the races from Warhammer 3. All the lords from Warhammer 3. So Demons of Chaos. So the Demons of Chaos, be it the Undivided, Khorne, Nurgle, Slaanesh, Tzeentch. They're all available. Grand Cafe is available. Kislev is available. And Be'lakor is also available, though he's not available in Realms of Chaos, but he is available in Immortal Empires. And I would say that Be'lakor is probably the most substantial addition, because to be quite blunt about it, many of the legendary lords for Warhammer 3 and the races associated with them aren't particularly great, but the Warriors of Chaos are certainly one of the best, if not the best, race currently in the game. And Be'lakor, even if you don't own the Warriors of Chaos, either the DLC for Warhammer 1 or the Champions of Chaos DLC for Warhammer 3, Be'lakor is still incredibly good, and his faction, even by default, feels pretty damn complete. I mean, you are gonna miss certain things. You're gonna miss out on like the Nurgle, Team, Slaanesh, Khorne stuff, but you're gonna have every Undivided stuff. You're gonna have the Gifts of Chaos. You're gonna have all the demons available. You're just gonna miss some Warrior of Chaos units. That's pretty much it. So you have a pretty powerful roster, and Undivided is, generally speaking, the most powerful, or one of the most powerful. I mean, there are some units, of course, from Khorne or Nurgle that can be really good, but by and large, Undivided is, typically speaking, the best. So giving people access to Be'lakor is a great decision. I believe Legend of Total War argued for just the baseline races. I don't think he included Be'lakor as part of his wish list, but they have given access to Be'lakor for everyone. And if you're just someone that's starting Warhammer 3 at the moment, and you don't have any DLC, right? You don't own any piece of DLC content for any of the games, I would say that out of all of the Legendary Lords available, that Be'lakor is your best bet. Now, Warriors of Chaos can be a bit too powerful, so they can certainly lead to a steamroll campaign. What else would I recommend if you only have game free? Well, I would avoid the demons and I would avoid the ogres. They've got issues. I mean, you can make a Scarbrand or a card campaign. You can make any campaign work if you want to, but they're just not well designed right now. But out of the other Warhammer free races, Grand Cafe, in particular Miao Ying, or if you're feeling like you want a bit of a harder start, Xiao Ming, are pretty good choices. Like Cafe, of all the Warhammer free races, is the best race, the best designed, the one that handles Immortal Empires in the best way. They do have an issue with terrain type, so it's hard to expand past Cafe, but for some early campaigns, you know, just to get the feel of the game, to understand the game, Cafe of the Warhammer free races outside of Be'lakor, Cafe is really the best choice. Then there's also Kislev. Now, Kislev has a large number of issues. Start position issues, lord issues, annoying mechanics. But, even though I would never recommend either Katrin or Costin because they have pretty miserable campaigns actually, there is one campaign that I would strongly recommend if you're gonna play Warhammer free. And you want to play a good faction, and you want to play a faction that's not just gonna steamroll the map, and you're not necessarily too keen on Cafe. And that is Boris Ursus. I would actually say playing Boris Ursus is actually a more enjoyable campaign than even Miao Ying or Xiao Ming. Like, he embodies the best traits of Kislev and gets away without many of the negatives Kislev has. Now, of course, you need to unlock Boris Ursus through the Realms of Chaos, but that's pretty simple. I've done a detailed guide on how to do it step by step. I did it pretty quickly on Legendary difficulty. All I did really was just set the battle difficulty to easy, but the campaign difficulty was set to Legendary. But I was able to unlock him, and it is very easy to unlock him. Just follow that guide, look at that video if you're interested in playing him. But those are the campaigns I would recommend. So either Be'lakor, the Cafeans, or Boris Ursus. Avoid everyone else if you're just looking at the Warhammer free races. Now, with that in mind, what else would I recommend people to get? Like, what kind of content is worth it? Well, that's a bit of a tricky question, and I think that's a subject for another video. But I would say that Warhammer 1 is a lot of value at the moment. Like, if you just buy Warhammer 1, as a new player in particular, it can be a lot of value. Not that Warhammer 2 doesn't have value, but I would say the races that are available in Warhammer 2 are probably better suited for someone that's a bit more experienced. With one major exception, of course, but you're going to get more value if you buy Warhammer 1 than you would just a baseline Warhammer 2. The reason I say that is because if you buy Warhammer 1, yes, you get the Empire, you get the Dwarves, and neither Empire or Dwarves are in a particularly good state right now. They're actually pretty bad. Like, I love Karl Franz, I love the Dwarves. They're not something I would recommend at the moment. Certainly without the DLC. Like, Dwarves and Empire don't have, only have one DLC pack, or actually two in the case of the Empire. But if you're playing the Empire without DLC, it's going to be a pretty bad experience at the moment. And the Dwarves without Belegar, I mean, the Dwarves are pretty decent even without Belegar, but there are things missing, but they're just a weak race, and there's a lot of hoops to jump through to make them workable. So, if you're picking up Warhammer 1, the reason you should pick Warhammer 1 is you would get access to the vampire counts. With the exception of Gorst, you'd get access to Manfred, Kemmler, Vlad, Isabella. That's what you'd get access to. Gorst is a DLC faction. He's associated with the Volkmar DLC for Empire, which is a DLC that I'd recommend you get if you want to have a better Imperial campaign. But you don't necessarily need Gorst for the Vampire Counts, because the Vampire Counts are one of the best races, and they're a really good race baseline-wise. Like, yes, Gorst does have some, like Gorst's DLC does add certain things that are important in the Vampire Count roster, but they're not essential in any way, shape, or form. You can certainly enjoy a complete campaign as the Vampire Counts just by default. They have ups and downs, of course, pros and cons, but they're one of the most powerful races in the game, and certainly an unstoppable one. Not quite on the level of the Warriors of Chaos in terms of how much they can steamroll the map, though they don't have the same limitation that the Warriors of Chaos have in terms of territory and Dark Fortresses. Another thing that you will get if you pick up Warhammer 1, of course, is the greenskins. The entire, with the exception of Grom the Punch, who is associated with Warhammer 2, so I believe you need Warhammer 2 for that. I mean, Grom is actually, when you think about Grom's DLC, do you need Grom? He does add certain things, yes, but even without any DLC, so like just thinking about Grimgor, Azag, and Warzag, like Grimgor and Azag are two really powerful legendary lords in the game for a very powerful race. The Skarsnik DLC, which is a Warhammer 1 DLC, does add some pretty powerful units. Specifically, one of the best early game infantry units in the entire game, which is the Nasty Skulkers, which is probably a reason enough to pick up this DLC. It also adds the Belagar portion of the DLC. But the greenskins, even without that, are still going to be really, really powerful. I mean, it's just one unit that is really important. Grom's DLC does add a hero that does give you replenishment, but greenskins will not necessarily struggle with replenishment even without that one hero. The hero I'm talking about here, the one in question, are the Giant River Troll Hags. Those are the ones that give you replenishment, but greenskins will be in a pretty good state regardless. But those two races, the greenskins, the vampire counts, can be a bit steamrolling, and while people will enjoy that to a certain extent, I think that having a campaign where you just completely dominate the map from turn 1 is not necessarily the most fun experience, especially as you gain, if you've got any kind of experience playing Total War in the past, you haven't played Warhammer up until this point, but you know how to play Total War. In that case, I would recommend Warhammer 2 specifically for the High Elves. Now, the DLC for the High Elves, specifically Alariel and Elfarion, they're good DLC lords, but are they essential? Not necessarily. And the High Elves are very strong by default. I mean, Alariel's DLC does give you some really powerful range units, but they're more late game units, and most of the difficulty of a campaign comes early game. So Sisters are great, but they're not mandatory. Elfarion has some very specific units, but only he can use them, so you're not really going to suffer from not having them for the most part if you're playing as the other legendary lords of the High Elves. And you do have two really good choices, including one of the best campaigns in the entire game. Like, Tyrion is a really good campaign for people starting out, because it's a campaign that can really teach you how to play the game. I would say probably better than most other campaigns in the game, because you have a powerful race, you've got a lot of power, but you do have some things to deal with. But you're not really under a significant amount of danger when you're playing as Tyrion. But the best campaign in the game is actually Alif Anar's. The reason I would say Alif Anar's campaign is the best, he's a free DLC lord, right? So you do gain certain unique units that only he can use. You gain a lot of power with Alif Anar. He has an ambush stance as his default movement stance, so you can ambush enemies easier. He can also use an underway, so you can traverse the map very, very quickly. But what really makes this campaign great is that you've got a campaign where you have a lot of power, but you're also up against some pretty good enemies. So if you want, so this is, Alif Anar's campaign from my perspective is the best campaign in the game, flat out right now. Because one of the problems in this game is you can have a difficult early game. There are many legendary lords that have that, but what then ends up happening is you dominate, is you win past that early game, and then you dominate the mid game and the late game especially. Well, Alif Anar's campaign is not going to let you do that. Now, there are some downsides, of course, with Alif Anar, but it is, in my view, one of the best, if not the best campaign currently in the game, and the one I'd recommend the most. So if you're picking up Warhammer 2, you can play Alif Anar if you own Warhammer 2. There are places, of course, where you can buy Warhammer 1 and Warhammer 2 much cheaper than they are currently on Steam, by the way. like Fanatical and some other websites. Probably cheaper to get access to Warhammer 1, and you get the greenskins and vampire counts. But that's all for now. I'm glad that Creative Assembly did this. Certainly player numbers for Immortal Empires or for Warhammer 3 were dropping by quite a significant amount. We're like at the threshold of going below 10,000 concurrent users on Steam, like active players on Steam right now for the game. So this is hopefully going to energize the base. And look, it's not going to be enough to bring up, to increase the numbers. We need major changes. We need the Chaos Dwarves, but certainly this is going to build up a lot of hype. We'll see what Creative Assembly does in the future, but if they can get that ball rolling, then it will get a lot of people engaged. But for the moment, they've done the right decision because they've eliminated the barrier of entry, and they've made it so that a lot more people can enjoy Immortal Empires than they were before. And you no longer have to pay a ridiculous barrier of entry to get access to the game. So, Costin here, signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, enable notifications, and stay tuned for more.